Come see us on tour in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, San Jose, Toledo, and Bakersfield. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. And we have special guests with us today. Ben Cohen is here. You know Ben Cohen.
Yeah, Ben Cohen is here, I'll say. In a big way.
Who is he? He's an American businessman, activist, philanthropist. He's known for co-founding the popular ice cream company Ben and Jerry's, which I have fallen victim to many times in my life. He's also, for many years, been a prominent activist supporting leftist causes, just like me. Most recently, though, he's expressed support for the Trump administration's cuts to USAID and proposed cuts to the Pentagon budget. Wow. Welcome to the show, Ben Cohen.
Well, I did support cuts to the Pentagon budget, which appear to be evaporating. I did not support cuts for USAID, although I do understand that part of what USAID does is act as a CIA front, but I certainly support the work that USAID was doing in terms of healthcare for people and food for people, etc.
Yeah, I've heard that was somewhere around 10%, if that, made it to actual helping people, and most of it was just, funding propaganda and color revolutions and overthrowing democratically elected governments. I mean, USAID is just a CIA cutout, as you said, right?
Correct. I believe that that's a big part of what it does, and I mean, in terms of the food that they supply, it's all U.S. food, which kind of undercuts the domestic agricultural industries in those countries. So yeah, there were definitely problems with USAID, but they did do good stuff as well.
And there was, even when they did good stuff, there's always strings attached, right?
Yeah.
There's always nefarious reasons for them to do good. They're not a bunch of do-gooders like you and me.
and your viewers as well.
Correct. Well, I just wanted to go over this just real quick, because I saw this. DOGE released this. It's the FDA, CDC, CMS, HHS, and OSHA. They're terminating leases for buildings that are basically been empty, right? And so you probably can't see it. I'll tell you. Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, 119,000 square feet, $2.4 million is their annual lease. They cut that. There's not in Seattle, Washington, 69,000 square feet, $3 million a year. They cut that. So they're doing at a bunch of that, and that's coming from the FDA, CDC, HHS, and OSHA. And here's a local from I think San Antonio did a local news report on some of it right here. Let's watch.
Andy, in a post on X, DOGE said the Department of Health and Human Services had terminated a contract paying Family Endeavors $18 million a month to operate an empty facility in West Texas.
The organization is also known as Endeavors, and you may have seen its administrative headquarters and wellness center on Dezavala Road, where it has a cluster of buildings and storefronts. DOGE focused on an overflow housing facility for migrant families Endeavors operates in Pecos, Texas, which DOGE says has been sitting empty, while Endeavors has been receiving the $18 million per month. Homeland Security reposted DOGE's X post, tagging U.S. Attorney Ed Martin with the words, "Please investigate," to which Martin responded, "Duly noted, we are on it." I went to Endeavor's San Antonio headquarters today to get a comment from the organization. They responded late this afternoon by email. Endeavors was responsible for maintaining operational readiness at the Pecos shelter, ensuring the ability to scale from cold status, operationally ready but not actively serving children, to full use of 3,000 beds as needed. Decisions regarding facility use and migrant sheltering locations were made by the federal government, not Endeavors. Any claims of corruption or mismanagement are baseless. DOGE also claims Endeavors received its HHS contract in 2021 after a former ICE employee and Biden transition team member joined the nonprofit.
Endeavor's government disclosure forms show its revenues shot up in 2021 from $50 million to $658 million, reaching a peak of $1.1 billion in 2022. For the News 4 I-Team Waste Watch, I'm Jay Avila.
It's Jay Avila giving us our Waste Watch. Thank you, Jay. Nice job. Now, just to full disclosure, they have decreased what they think they're going to make in their savings, right? So they were first saying they're going to get like something like 600. So it's 748 federal sites, including 30 FDA facilities across 23 states. But as of March 5th, they say they will save nearly $468 million, according to the department's wall of receipts. That was down from $660 million originally. So that's come down. So so you would be, in theory, I think in theory, right? Everybody's for the theory of what Doge is doing, correct?
Everybody wants things to be more efficient and to eliminate waste. The problem is that, the federal budget is trillions of dollars. It's hard to get your arms around how much money that is, but the reality is that 50% of the budget is spent on the Pentagon, which gets close to $1 trillion a year. And Doge has just been fiddling around the edges, working with these other departments that get little itsy bitsy slices of the federal budget, and they've pretty much been ignoring the biggest spender and the biggest waster and the most corrupt department in the federal government, which is the Pentagon.
The Pentagon, which can't pass an audit, fails every audit. They can't even tell you where the money's going, and it's by far. Now, Trump had given lip service earlier this year. He said he wants to have friendly relations with Russia and China, which I'm all for. And he said that we could propose to cut our military budget by 50%. Unfortunately, as of today, Trump is pushing a budget, a continuing resolution that it increases the Pentagon budget by $6 billion. So what do you make of that?
That what he originally said was that he wants to cut the Pentagon budget by 50% was apparently bullshit.
Yeah.
What we heard Sunday from Trump is that he would never cut the Pentagon budget. There had been talks about cutting 8% a year, and then it turned out, no, we're just going to transfer that to other parts of the Pentagon budget. So, it appears that the so-called deep state has gotten to Trump, and he's not really planning on cutting the Pentagon budget at all, despite the fact that it's the most wasteful, most corrupt part of the federal government that there is.
I had Steve Bannon on the show, and he made the same point that you just made. He said if they're not willing to go across the Potomac, meaning to the Pentagon, that this isn't real, and that's where you have to cut. And if you're
that's correct. I mean, I was amazed that I saw what Bannon said, that the Pentagon is obscene, Pentagon budget is obscene, and it must be cut. And I couldn't believe that finally there's something that Bannon said that I agree with.
Yeah, I mean, he also said that if you're going to cut Medicaid, you got to be careful. You can't use a meat cleaver because there's a lot of MAGA that are on Medicaid. There's something close to 80 million people in the country have some form of Medicaid. So those are two things I would agree with him on. You got to be careful, and you got to use a scalpel and not a meat cleaver. And go ahead. You want to say?
There is waste in any large bureaucracy. There was waste at Ben and Jerry's. I'm sure that there's waste in Elon Musk's businesses. But you need to focus on where the most waste is, and they're just dealing with small potatoes. I mean, the numbers sound big to us, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, but the Pentagon budget is, it makes those things look like just little ants.
And, the real explosion happened after 9/11, and we don't really have an enemy in the world. We're surrounded by oceans, and Canada and Mexico aren't any threat to invade us, and neither is anybody else. So this is just what Eisenhower warned about, right? This is the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. And do you think we'll ever? I mean, it doesn't. It seems like it's why I'm starting to become a pessimist on the country, because nobody seems to be able to take this on.
Well, I'm working with a bunch of other people that are starting the Common Sense Defense campaign, and it is taking it on. And, we're starting with nuclear weapons, which is, the best, easiest to understand window into the Pentagon mentality, which is overkill. So, there was one nuclear explosion on Hiroshima. It killed 100,000 people right off. Another 100,000 were seriously injured, burns, radiation disease, blindness, deafness, loss of limbs. And so that one bomb did a lot of damage. Our current nuclear arsenal is the equivalent of 50,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs. I mean, that is immoral, absurd, irrational, and insane. And yet the country is planning on spending another $2 trillion on a whole new generation of nukes. So that just gives you a picture of the mentality of the Pentagon budget. You think about what else we could have gotten with that money in terms of things that people actually need and want, like housing, healthcare, childcare. And the reality is that we've got all the money we need. It's just that we're spending it all on threatening to kill people instead of trying to help people live.
Yeah, I mean, I've made the point on this show many times. Imagine if we, went back to 1990s Pentagon funding, we could take, $800 billion a year and invest it in our own country, right? Imagine what that would look like. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I told this story before. When I was a kid, I lived in Chicago, Southwest Side, very blue collar. And there was a park a half a block away from my house called Vidham Park. And we used to have to share this little tiny gym with this grammar school. And so everybody in the neighborhood, and you couldn't, we really didn't have a gym facility. So they built one out of nowhere. It was like this $2 million facility, and it was wonderful and beautiful. And, psychologically, what that did for me as a child was like, it made me think like, oh my God, my community actually cares about me. They actually want things to be nice, and we can have nice things. And I'm sure that went a long way to not only psychologically, but, physically, a lot for people's health, right? So now we had a place you can go work out, you could play sports, you could play basketball, floor hockey, do a million things that people did in there. And it was just, that's the kind of things that we should be doing. China has high-speed rail. We don't have it here, of course. It's all full of corruption. But the idea of, the government spending the money, like right now, I've seen estimates that homelessness can be eradicated. It's an old estimate, but they say $20 billion. Well, let's say it's $40 billion. Well, California itself has spent around $40 billion on homelessness in the last 10 years, and it's only gotten way worse. And it's because every time I look into it, the way the government is spending that money, it's just nothing but graft. And it's just nothing but people in business to keep the homelessness going, because they run organizations that service it. And if homelessness goes away, their $500,000 salaries go away. So my point is, like, what the problem is, okay, let's say if we finally do get them to cut money from the Pentagon, isn't that mean the government's just going to spend it somewhere else and it's going to go in someone else's pocket? I mean, if you let the government spend it?
No, I think that the government is quite capable of doing things. I think Social Security is a great program. I think Medicare is a great program. I think there's a lot of parts of the education. I mean, yes, the government is quite capable of doing stuff. It's true that there is some amount of waste. I mean, but I don't think that that's the majority of what the government does. I think it's worthwhile. I think that, maybe we need to improve it, make it more efficient. Yes, but I think the government is capable, and like I say, if you want to look at where the waste is and how bad it is, it's in the Pentagon. I think that, the idea is just to use the power of the government to improve the quality of life for people, as opposed to using it to threaten to kill people.
Yeah, 100% with you on that. Now, you're a pretty wealthy guy, right? From starting Ben and Jerry's, you were self-made and you built that company. I think you sold it, right? And
yeah. And it got sold. I tried to keep it independent. It was a publicly held company.
Oh, okay, got you. So we've learned from the Princeton study 10 years ago that we don't live in a democracy. We actually live in an oligarchy, meaning that what the regular person, if you're in the bottom 90% of wage earners, you don't have any influence on legislation. But if you're in the upper 10%, there's a direct correlation, right? Between if 50% of the upper 10% want something, 50% of the time it happens. So now you run in circles. I certainly don't, with people who are wealthy. The 1% or the upper 10% who actually control things. What is don't they want to do this? I often say this, like, if I'm a small business owner and I want single payer healthcare because I'm sick and tired of paying twice as much as the rest of the world, which when I say twice as much, that means 100% more than the rest of the world for worse results, right? And then just to have some parasite, some vampire insurance guy skim even more off the top by denying me health care that my doctor wants me to have. So I want to get that capitalist out from in between me and my doctor. So I don't understand why all the rest of the business owners don't want to have that same thing. You travel in those circles. What is it like to talk to those people? Why aren't they on board with single payer, and why aren't they on board with cutting the Pentagon?
Well, for one, I don't really travel in those circles. I'm pretty much traveling more like in your circles, Jimmy. But yeah, I don't get it. Providing health care for people is good for American companies. Then they wouldn't be expected to provide it. A lot of people get health care assistance, health insurance assistance, paid for by their businesses, businesses that they work for. And so, I mean, if we had, Medicare for all, those businesses wouldn't have to put out that money, and they'd be more competitive with other businesses in other countries around the world, every other developed country that does provide free health care for its people. So, yeah, I mean, the business guys I associate with, they would want Medicare for all, but I don't know what's going on with the other guys. I mean, some people have said to me, well, they're just totally philosophically opposed to it because providing health care for your population to them smacks of socialism.
Well, I mean, everything is social. I mean, libraries are socialism. Schools, roads, highways. That's also socialism. I mean, socialism has been distorted to actually what it is, right? Firemen. Everyone loves firemen. And that's socialism, right?
Yeah.
So that I think. Where do you think the left lost the narrative on socialism?
Well, I think that socialism got conflated with communism.
Yes.
And, people are anti-communist, they're anti-socialists. I believe that there is a good combination, a very viable combination of socialism and capitalism, and you see that in a lot of the Scandinavian countries, a lot of other countries in Europe, where they're definitely capitalist, but they take care of the needs of their people. The taxes take care of the needs of their people so that everybody can afford to go to college. Everybody has free health care. Everybody has sick days off, has vacations. And what do you know? The businesses in those countries, they're doing just fine. It's not like they're going out of business. What's the problem?
I agree. I did a tour last year of the Scandinavian countries. We were in Denmark, we were in Sweden, we were in Norway, we were in the Netherlands, and it's wonderful. It's like I came away like, oh my God, human beings can actually engineer societies that work for people instead of our country, where it seems like, it's, as George Carlin said, it's socialism for the wealthy and rugged individualism for everybody else, which is exactly what it is. You're on your own. So again, I just don't understand the upper 10%, which actually controls things. It's I can. So you're starting an organization to try to get them to cut the Pentagon, and it's connected with climate change in a weird way that all the people who I hear screaming the loudest about climate change, people like John Kerry, people like Al Gore, people like Mark Zuckerberg, people like Greta Thunberg. Not one of them. The biggest carbon emitter in the world is the U.S. military. We have 800 bases, probably more than that, around the world. Not one of them ever proposes that we cut back on those 800 military bases, which makes me think that they're all full of it, that they're not serious about it, right? And they take their private jets to Davos, and they come up with ideas like eliminating gas-powered leaf blowers, but not gas-powered private jets, which emits more carbon in one flight than my car does in my lifetime. So it's hard for me to. So if we did cut, if those people were serious about it, they'd want to cut the military like you do, correct?
Absolutely. And I think what's going on is that there's been this divide or silos between people that are focused on the climate and people that are focused on national budget priorities, militarism, the Pentagon budget. But I think that those two groups of people need to come together, because the Pentagon is the largest polluter and the largest contributor to global warming. And if you care about it, you got to target the Pentagon.
And so what is your strategy? Do you have a strategy to try to get people on board with your movement? Does it have a name, your organization?
It's Common Sense Defense.
Okay.
And it's kind of the idea that overkill is killing us. And it's a communications campaign. It's mostly a PR campaign. We also use advertising and kind of special events to draw media attention to this issue. And it's interesting that even Trump now has been talking about denuclearizing, and that's something that needs to be done. The problem is he's just looking to shift that money into other Pentagon, other weapon systems. So I think, the problem exists inside the Beltway, and the problem is only going to be solved outside the Beltway. People need to start standing up and telling their politicians that they don't want to spend so much money on killing people, and they want the government to meet their needs at home every day. And when there's enough people doing that and they make their voice heard enough, politicians eventually start listening. And you need a vote based on those things. And unbelievably enough, making a phone call to your congressperson does really make a difference. Not so much with emails, not so much with sign-on petitions, but actually making the phone call. And it's not a big thing. All you need to do is say what you think, and they just make a little tally mark next to an issue on the other side.
So, I mean, if there's ever a cause, I think everybody could come together. Most, I'm talking about 80% of the country, at least, if not more, would be to cut the Pentagon budget. Nobody wants it. It keeps going, which just proves that we don't have any influence on legislation in this country. I mean, regular people, the voting public. So, I mean, I would do anything I can to help out. Do you have a website?
Not yet.
Oh,
we're working on it. But there is.
I know a guy.
When Doge started out, we said, well, here's an opportunity. So we do have a website called dogeversusblob.org. And it is a contest on Twitter. I guess it's called X now, where you can come up with a meme that focuses on a particular piece of Pentagon waste. We give you the information on that website, dogeversusblob.org, and you can win Dogecoins, and you can communicate pretty much direct to Elon because he's monitoring this stuff all the time.
So, well, I hope something happens because this is unsustainable. This is how all empires end. We overextend militarily, and it's 100% corrupted government owned by the military-industrial complex, Wall Street, and Big Pharma. And if we don't get, I had high hopes that Donald Trump would do something. I still have hope. They're not high, and I don't have faith. But we'll see. If anything, it's the corruption in our government is being fully revealed. That AIPAC controls our government, the military-industrial complex controls our government, Big Pharma. And those are the people who, also fossil fuel companies control our government. Just look at the Nord Stream pipeline and the whole point of that.
Right. I mean, what's really, I think, destructive is that our government, which is supposedly a representative democracy, is using our money to prepare to kill millions of people just like us who happen to live on the other side of some invisible line. That's what our money is being spent for. To kill mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons and daughters, people just like us who just happen to be born in some other different country. And that destroys the spirit and the soul of our nation.
Isn't it amazing how easy it was for the establishment through the media to gin up an enemy, right? So they always have to have an enemy to justify their war spending. And I grew up in the time of, there was all terrorism and fighting terrorists. Well, first it was Russia, right, when I was a kid. Then it switched to terrorists, and then that wore off, right? And then they reinvented Russia as a bad guy again, as some kind of, Russia's not threatening to invade the United States. Russia's not going to attack us. Wasn't it amazing how easily they did that and they attached it to Donald Trump? Were you surprised at that?
It is amazing how easy it is to get people scared, to use propaganda to scare people that other countries are trying to come to get them. But it's not true. Essentially, it's the U.S. policy that makes those other countries into enemies, because the official U.S. policy is that another country that starts to develop economically or militarily is automatically an enemy, and we need to sanction them economically. And right now, the U.S. Pentagon is planning for a war with China, and they are doing exercises related to that. They're buying weapons that are specifically related to that. And, you know, I mean, haven't the wars in Iraq and Vietnam and Ukraine proven that these huge military powers, the US, Russia, they're not even able to take over a little country, much less take over the United States?
You would think 20 years of Afghanistan, and then the Afghanistan papers, which revealed that there was just 20 years of lies. That's all it was.
Right. Justifications to continue shoveling more and more dollars into weapons manufacturers.
That's it. Well, Doge versus the Blob. That's fantastic. Doge versus the Blob.
Yeah, check it out. It's kind of a fun website. It's not only is it educational, but it's entertaining.
Okay. I'm going to tell everybody to by the way, you sued Unilever, right, for selling Ben & Jerry's in the West Bank. Can you tell us about that?
Well, what happened was that Ben & Jerry's, the company, and the independent board of Ben & Jerry's and Unilever, the corporate parent of Ben & Jerry's, agreed to stop selling Ben & Jerry's ice cream in the West Bank because we did not agree with how Israel was treating Palestinians. This was way before October 7th. And then what happened was that there was so much pushback from Israel that Unilever kind of unilaterally decided to sell the rights to Ben & Jerry's to somebody in Israel. And that kind of usurped the authority of the independent board of Ben & Jerry's. And so the independent board then sued Unilever. Okay.
Well, I also hear that Ben & Jerry's has 36 varieties of vegan ice cream.
It's amazing. There's a lot of that vegan ice cream, and what's also amazing about it is that it tastes really good. I was really surprised. I did not have very high hopes, but it's really good stuff. And you know, the problem is stores don't have that much shelf space, so it's hard to find all 36 flavors at whatever store you go to. But it's good stuff.
But are you big into animal rights?
I like animals. I mean, sure. I don't want to have animals mistreated.
Okay. All right. And you're no relation to Ethan Cohen, correct?
not last I checked.
Okay. All right. Ben Cohen, Doge versus the Blob. Everybody check out that website. Everybody get on board. Maybe get some mass movement to try to cut the Pentagon, because it doesn't look like our political leaders have the will. So, but I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much for spending some time with our audience.
Good to be here with you, Jimmy.
Okay. Good luck. Hey, have you ever wondered what happened to the legendary Chuck Norris? Well, recently I saw a video he made. I saw the video, and I was shocked. He's in his 80s, and he's still kicking butt and working out and staying active. What's even more shocking is he's even stronger. He can work out longer and even has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this by making one change. He says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife even started doing this one thing too, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. Chuck made a special video that explains everything. Make sure you watch it by going to chuckdefense.com/Jimmy or by clicking on the link below this video. Once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Jimmy, and click on the link in this description below to watch the video. You won't believe how simple it is. Just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 84 years old and yet has more energy than I do. He discovered he could create dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on 3 things that sabotage our body, or do you say sabotage, as we age. Watch his method by clicking the link in the description box below, chuckdefense.com/Jimmy. Come see us on tour in Baltimore, Hartford, Syracuse, Atlantic City, Levittown, New York, Cohoes, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, San Jose, Toledo, and Bakersfield. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.